Richard was working on his farm during one of the busiest days of the harvest. His property was divided into areas of crops with vegetables and fruits, and the animal area was small compared to other farms that had more land and work areas. However, Richard was satisfied with his inheritance and worked hard every day to keep his property in excellent condition. He was mentally going over all the tasks he needed to complete before nightfall when he heard what sounded like a car skidding and a loud crash. He looked up confused and soon saw a thin column of smoke spreading near where he was. What could that be? I hope it didn't hit my apple trees, he thought. He ran to where the smoke was coming from and found one of the apple trees bent and a destroyed luxury car that was quickly being consumed by flames. Upon examining the car, he realized that the driver was not at the wheel, which relieved him a little. The silence in the forest next to his apple orchard was broken by the sound of someone crawling. Richard followed the direction of the noise and, to his surprise, saw partially burned clothes left behind. His curiosity about who that person was outweighed his concern, so he decided to follow the footsteps. He didn't have to go far before he saw a woman with her back turned trying to get up. He took off his shirt and opened it as he noticed she had no clothes. The driver was actually a young woman about 20 years old who was unconscious, devoid of clothing, but still breathing. He picked her up in his arms. The beautiful woman tried to say a few words but couldn't and passed out. Richard hesitated for a moment between examining the strange girl more closely or putting out the fire, but after a glance at the flames that were serving, he decided there was nothing more to do. His house hose wouldn't reach that far, and the car could explode again. He carried the young woman in his arms and took her to his house, where he laid her on his bed. He examined her carefully, checking that besides the head wound due to the impact, there was nothing to worry about. He went to the kitchen and called the firefighters, also requesting help from doctors, explaining the situation of the woman who was driving. 30 minutes passed, as Richard's farm was quite far from the nearest town. During that time, the woman's car exploded and a large part of his apple orchard. Richard was furious while the firefighters managed to contain the fire to prevent further damage. The paramedics treated the young woman's wounds and were impressed that no vital organs had been affected in the accident. She was alive, and that was thanks to God and Richard, said the doctor. However, the old 67-year-old farmer replied angrily, I'm not interested in being a hero. What I want is for this woman to wake up soon and pay me for my lost crops. The paramedics looked at each other uncomfortably, as Richard had the reputation of being a very grumpy man dissatisfied with any situation. Well, replied the head paramedic, your request will have to wait. We need to take this young lady to the town hospital to make sure she's completely okay. Richard reacted poorly and angrily in his voice, asking, how long is this going to take? It may be that the blow to the head has left her disoriented, and it's best for her to wake up in a hospital, said the doctor, trying to be as clear as possible to calm the farmer. Despite the man's good intentions, his strategy didn't seem to work, as Richard expelled them from his property with his rough manner. Days passed, and although the sweet and toasty smell of ruined wood and fruits in the apple orchard could be felt in the forest, this odor deeply irritated Richard, as it was a reminder of an unpaid debt. Every afternoon, after finishing the typical tasks of a busy harvest season, he went to the hospital to check if the girl had woken up. However, every time the nurse's response was the same, not yet, Mr. Richard, but if you want, you can visit her in the morning. Troubled by the girl's condition, the old man walked past her room and watched the girl for about 15 minutes. The nurses weren't sure, but they concluded that Mr. Richard, as no one else had come to ask about the beautiful girl even though they had sent a report to the police with her description. Richard repeated this routine of visiting the hospital every afternoon for just over a month. The doctors, unaware of whom to deliver the girl's health reports to, gave them to Richard, the only one who approached to ask about her. The old farmer patiently listened to the doctors telling him that it was very likely that the woman would wake up with slight memory loss and that in that case it was best not to burden her with debt problems. Richard just felt it but didn't respond. He was very annoyed by the loss he had suffered but also felt sorry for the girl and had no idea why the accident had happened. Finally, as the weather began to change one afternoon while Richard was silently visiting the girl, she began to wake up. Surprised, Richard called the nurses and on-duty doctors quickly. The doctors approached her and moved Richard away, who decided to wait outside for as long as necessary. 20 minutes passed until one of the doctors came out to inform Richard about the latest development. Richard, as we suspected, this girl is very disoriented. She has no idea who she is or where she is. She constantly asked for her phone as she believes all her information is there. But as we know, it burned in the fire. We believe she'll need to stay here for a few more days, but I don't think we can do much more for her. There's a possibility she stays at your house for a while until the police and we can contact her family, said the doctor. Richard grimaced as he didn't agree to have a young woman bothering on his property all the time. He had gotten used to being alone, but during those visits, his heart had softened a bit. With a sigh, he finally accepted the doctor's proposal. The old farmer didn't know it, but his peaceful and organized life was about to take an unexpected turn. As the doctor had predicted, only 5 days passed, and the girl didn't make much progress in her memories. She asked to be called Paula, although she wasn't sure if that was her name. When Richard came to pick her up, the girl reacted badly, questioning why she should go to that man's house. She wanted to stay in the hospital until she remembered something. With sovereign patience, the doctor explained again to the girl, somewhat nervous about the attitude Richard would take, that he had already explained to her that Richard had found and rescued her. She couldn't stay there because finding her family and her recovery could take a long time, and they didn't have resources to help her all the time she needed. He assured her that Richard was an honorable man, known to everyone in town, and that he was the best and only option she had at the moment. The girl huffed with annoyance, grabbed the small backpack with clothes donated by the hospital nurses, and walked out the door without thanking the doctor. She simply turned to Richard and said, "Let's go, we don't have all day." The old farmer bid farewell to the doctor as they had become friends over the time he visited the girl. Then he walked alongside the young woman, showing her the way to his old work truck. Upon seeing the old vehicle, Paula grimaced in displeasure but got in. As they were on their way, the girl suddenly asked him, "Do you have a phone? I want to check social media to see if I find any clues about me." The nurses didn't want to lend me theirs as they said the most important thing was to find my family, but how am I going to find them if I don't access social media? Richard replied calmly, although the girl's tone of voice irritated him, "I do have a cell phone, but I don't believe it's what you desire. Furthermore, I don't have internet at home." Paula opened her eyes so wide it seemed like they were going to pop out. "You don't have internet? How do you even live and stay informed? It's incredible that someone lives without internet these days. What am I supposed to do while I'm here with you?" The farmer smirked mischievously and said, reproachfully, "Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, girl, a month ago you crashed your fancy car into one of my apple trees on my property. All in all, then, I have some news for you. You owe me at least $2,000 in damages, not to mention the days of work, that is, the labor. So, what you'll do while you recover your memory will be to help me on the farm. If you remember who you are and return to your family, I trust your good behavior to pay off your debt. Playing for the BMW you were driving, I'm sure you won't have any difficulties." Paula was astonished. Richard thought she would protest and was prepared to respond, but incredibly the girl just said, "Really? I was driving a BMW? Wow, my family must be rich. How exciting. I need to recover my memory soon." The man sighed softly and thought to himself, "You better do that soon, girl." Upon arriving at the farm, Richard showed her the room where she would sleep and the rest of the house. Paula didn't like it at first, but she couldn't do anything but accept. "There's no internet, there's no decent TV, there's nothing here. How do you manage to live every day?" The farmer shrugged and said, "Girl, I have a lot of work to do every day. I've been distracted enough by picking you up at the hospital. You can do me a favor and settle down quietly. If you're bored, there are plenty of things you can do here to help me. The pigs need feeding and I haven't finished harvesting the carrots yet. You could change out of that uncomfortable clothing and help instead of just weighing down the floor like a spoiled brat." Paula was upset but decided to do what he asked. As she tended to the pigs and harvested the carrots, the girl tried to focus on recovering some memory, but it was futile. She only had a strange feeling that she needed to check social media and stay updated to appear as best as possible, which was difficult with that ugly work clothing. At one point she realized she was completely covered in mud and dirt. She sighed angrily as she thought, "Now I understand why the nurses gave me such ugly and loose clothes. They knew what I was getting into." The dynamic continued for a few days until one afternoon, after finishing the tasks on the farm, Paula was completely bored. Trying to improve the TV signal, she finally let herself fall onto the uncomfortable couch. She turned to Richard, who said nothing. He was focused on solving a puzzle with the help of a dictionary. "Mr. Richard, why don't you have a wife?" The man wasn't bothered by the question and simply continued his task, while responding, "I used to have a wife some time ago, but she drifted away from me and left. She said I lacked ambition and simply packed up and left." Paula continued the conversation, having nothing better to do. "Did you have any children?" "We had a daughter. But, as I told you, my wife wasn't happy with the life we had here, she left. I haven't known for a long time if she found the life she wanted and never let me see my daughter again. Whenever I tried to find them, she would hide the girl. There came a point where I couldn't find them anymore and I got tired of trying. Now I pray to God that my daughter is well." The young woman, upon hearing this sad story, felt great compassion for that honest man who had experienced such a difficult life. Out of mere curiosity, she asked a few more questions. "And what was your daughter's name?" The old farmer grimaced and replied, with a sigh, "She was named after you, although you said you're not sure if that's your real name." "I hope it's not." The girl tried not to feel attacked, now that she understood better this man who had seen the worst side of life and perhaps acted that way because of it. That night, Paula stayed up late cleaning as a way to thank Richard for being so honest with her. The next morning, something totally unexpected happened. Richard and Paula woke up to 2 knocks on the worn-out door of the cabin. The farmer grabbed his old gun as a precaution and opened the door without asking who it was. He was a little scared to see that it was the police, but not the calm town officers. They were wearing special uniforms and had an aggressive attitude. They entered, knocking everything down and destroying Richard's few possessions. They immobilized him and told him to stay silent while they searched the house. The man remained quiet as the police searched everything until he finally heard Paula scream and one of the officers say, "We found her, looks like she's okay." Unable to bear it anymore, Richard shouted, "Can someone explain to me what's going on here?" A female voice, among all the voices that were speaking at that moment, replied, "You're what's happening, you miserable kidnapper." Richard couldn't believe it, but he would recognize that voice anywhere. It was his wife, the one who had left, Joanna. "What are you doing here?" he asked, incredulous. "What do you think I'm doing?" she replied angrily. "I'm rescuing our daughter that you kidnapped, you shameless." "I have no idea what you're talking about, woman, have you gone mad? Didn't they tell you in town what happened? This young woman crashed her car into my property, she showed up here on her own." The officers looked to the woman for an explanation, but suddenly Paula spoke up, asking what was going on. Joanna completely ignored her ex-husband and began to comfort her daughter, who didn't understand anything. After 15 minutes, the police left the property without apologizing for the damages. They simply gave Richard a warning about staying away from the women. Upon returning home, Paula was in shock. Apparently, she was a famous celebrity with a lot of money thanks to her work as an actress and model since she was very young. Her mother was her manager's right-hand woman, and through her, Paula had achieved great success, leading a luxurious life. At only 22 years old, she had already built a name for herself as Paulista, as everyone knew her. "I can't believe you crashed right into this man's farm," Joanna said. "I was so scared when I found out where you were here. I immediately called the police. But don't worry, everything is fine now, I'm here with you." Paula was confused and a little scared by her mother's fierce attention. She thought maybe her mother wasn't telling her everything and decided to ask her manager. "Well, Paula, the truth is you disappeared because of a fight with your mother. She didn't want you to find out more about your father, and all that stress was affecting your work a lot. So, you asked for a 3-month break to get your emotions in order. Your mother nearly went crazy when she found out you had hired a private detective and got so angry that she even slapped you. That morning you left with your car and took any path. We thought you would come back when you calmed down, but that didn't happen. We worried. After 2 days, we started looking for you, but only recently did the police contact us with a clue about your whereabouts. When your mother heard the police report, she immediately went out to look for you with the help of a special squad, under the pretext that your father had kidnapped you." Paula couldn't believe what she was hearing, but at that moment she made a decision. She worked hard to recover her memories, and when she felt ready, she went to talk to her father, ignoring her mother's protests, who was trying to prevent her from seeing Richard. Richard had already resigned himself to never seeing his daughter again after seeing what she had become. He started replanting his apple trees and tried to come to terms with everything that had happened. But one day, upon waking up very early, he saw a young woman working in his fields. It was Paula. "Hello, Richard. I'm really sorry about how we reunited, but I want to start over with you. I want to plant the most beautiful apple orchard, or at least try to recover it. Besides, I want to get to know each other better and have enough trust to call you Dad." Richard's eyes filled with tears, and holding his daughter's hand, he said, "It will be the most beautiful, because we will do it together, daughter." And giving her a tight hug, they both received the greatest reward they could imagine. What do you think of the story, my dear friends? Undoubtedly, a sublime message is found in the story. If you manage to identify it, tell me in the comments, and I'll give you a heart. Thank you for watching until here. See you soon. A big hug and God bless you.